We're live a minute early. Okay. It's all right. Hey, gents, how are you?
Hello.
Oh, great opening.
Thank you. Listen, folks, for those of you who haven't guessed, this is the Omicron 5 special because I got COVID. And it swept through my home. My wife has it. I think my kids probably had it, although they seem better. And I ran out of tests. So I'm waiting to get my tests to test them. So if I seem a little wonky, that's what that's all about. But we wanted to push ahead and put an episode out there because this was the season finale for Lower Decks. And yes. it was a really good episode, I thought. But I'm going to turn it over to the gents. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well, guys. And Chris, I for what it's worth, can't tell you're sick at all. There was a little wonkiness there trying to recall the name of the series we're talking about, but that's it so far. So
yeah,
you're doing great.
Yeah. Well, you'll notice that the bridge of the Enterprise is very small, so it was kind of hard to do social distancing. I had to take some of the crew off the bridge because it was just too crowded and not a healthy, smart thing to do. So,
and where did you go? Those tiny little masks.
You know what I did? I cut actual little masks.
Really? That was great.
My original plan was literally to sew a thread on each end. This is how spacey I've been with COVID, right? And like having a wrap around their ears, and I'm like, no, I'm just taping it on there.
It's a lot of work for
a lot of work for one gang. Yeah,
exactly.
But
we don't have. It's not like here at Trek Tonight we have a bevy of
a dedicated art department.
Yeah, dedicated art department, or at least what do you call them? Interns.
Yes,
right. There and do this crap for us. So
we're our own interns.
Yes, exactly. I am my own grandpa. So anyway, let's see. There he is. Keith. That's Keith, Camera Geek. Says, hi, real Joe Townsend.
Well, hey, Keith, and I wanted to thank you. I'm glad you popped in because you said this is Keith, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure.
He's watching on Twitch, and on Twitch he's Camera Geek. So
gotcha. Well, I said I told the guys, I told you privately as well as just before the show, but the Not Joe Townsend reference last week was so classic. I laughed out loud when I saw it later in the weekend. And thanks so much for coming on board. And I enjoyed the show after I subsequently watched it. And so sorry I couldn't be here last time, but I am back. And I guess not the Joe Townsend's here this week. So.
Right.
Exactly. So
John Van Gunston is here again, giving us a up. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. So Leo, how you been?
I was fighting a cold earlier this week. Like last week, like if you remember last week, I was feeling like a little under the weather.
Right.
And I sort of took it easy. And I still have like a lingering bit of, mech, little speckle of the old Gezektagenoid. So
it's instantly a Mel Brooks film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I am feeling better overall.
Good.
And
Yes.
and this week's episode certainly, if I was not feeling well, this episode would make me feel terrific. This was the season finale for season 3, The Stars at Night, a reference to the Texas class ships that we saw last week. Which
Do you
they
know it
very
took me to the end to get what that meant? That's how spacey I am. I
well,
was
no,
like,
that's
oh, it's because they're Texas class. I get it.
yeah, deep in the heart of Texas,
Texas.
as as demonstrated by Pee Wee Herman when he was at the Alamo
Yes.
to prove his location to Dot.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a very interesting episode because we come right back. The Cerritos needs to be refit because it got a real pounding from the Breen,
Right.
and the captain is sort of under the in the hot seat, because of how Project was it Project
Swing by.
Swing By
Yes.
is deemed by the Admiralty as being a bit of a waste of time and resources, and then Admiral Winamigo is saying, listen, it's basically, hey, what about my my Texas class ships? They could do all that and with no risk to life, and they're much better. And I'm recommending we mothball the California class.
Right.
And of course,
what did we say last week? We said that it was a setup, right?
it was a setup. Spoilers. And of course, if you're watching the show and you haven't watched this episode, what is
Turn
wrong
us
with
off.
you? Turn us off and come
Turn us
back.
off. Watch
Come
us
back.
later in the week.
Yes.
My goodness. Yeah.
But so let's consider it. Every episode is a spoiler zone for these. Take that as read. So yes, it was, or as I called him, Admiral Dumbass. So,
Well, he's certainly not buen amigo, is he?
he's not
No.
Buen Amigo. He's Malamigo.
Yeah.
He's a bad
Admiral
moral.
Bedford.
Of Admiral.
Admiral
That's right.
Bedford. But his whole, we get to, well, let's talk about the sort of the story rather than the payoff. The whole thing is, and the captain said, listen, before this goes public, like I don't want any of this to leak out because I'm going to fight this, and I want my crew to hear about it. And immediately, Boimler comes in, and I have it written down what the whole list of what was it? First of all, is from the towel guy, Fedorov, whose first name is Hans. I thought I had it written down. It was this whole long diatribe about how this like trail of rumors had gotten to them that they were going to mothball the California class, and Tendy's like, well, that's just rumors. And he said, well, it came from Fedorov, and she said, what? He said, what? He's the gossip king. He's never wrong. And Rutherford is all obsessed with the code that these Texas class ships are using.
Right.
He
recognizes something in it. Hey, John says, do you like the episode? The end was quickly wrapped up.
It's true. There is some, I think there might be some in fandom who feel like it was wrapped up too quickly. They're like, oh, but this is a sitcom. It just happens to be set on a Federation starship.
Right.
And the whole model of sitcoms is sort of the moving back to the status quo, although not exactly. There's character progression, but everybody's still back where they should be.
Well, Keith said something early today in the chat, and I think it's worth mentioning, and it's probably easier for me to say it than for him to type it in the comments. But
Sure.
The main difference, he said, which I think he's right, between other animated sitcom comedies and Lower Decks is the character development.
Yes,
I mean, there's a tiny bit of character development in The Simpsons, for example, but they're basically the same characters.
Well, it's I mean, one of the key parts is like when Lisa becomes a vegetarian, and they wrote that script, and they had Paul McCartney on and Linda McCartney.
Right.
And I'm this may be apocryphal, so I'm not sure if it was from them, but somebody said, listen, if she's going to be a vegetarian, she has to be a vegetarian going forward. It can't just be dropped the next episode.
Right.
Which they did, and it has been the source of some comedy going forward.
Right.
So I like
that is as Keith said earlier in our chat earlier today. That is a real difference with this show. It's definitely developing. The characters are developing. The story is developing. It's not a story arc really, like it would be in like it wasn't Picard, but it definitely moves along and develops and builds on itself, which is very different. And I think the hallmark of what makes it a pretty quality show.
I didn't perceive it to be as much of a quick wrap up. As a matter of fact, I kind of appreciated one thing that might have disappointed some other people in that they didn't try to load it down being a season finale with a lot of cameos and those types of surprises. They had a story to wrap up for this season. I recognize those elements. I mean, we got a Picard reference, but we didn't have a Picard cameo. That would just been extraneous and distracting, I think, in this particular story. So I think it had the right amount of resolution and plot development there.
Yeah. Well, and also too, the only thing that I felt was sort of thrown in there was they were hinting that they were going to have the Vulcan character from the Lower Decks episode in season 2 in the show, and they pretty much like got her in at the very last minute, like
just under the wire.
Under the wire. It's like, oh shit, we forgot to bring that character, and we were saying we were going to. All right, put her in the end.
It's quite possible, although it might have been planned in ahead of time.
It could have been,
but it was interesting bringing her in. And let me ask you this: this is a minor geeky note. When she first shows up, I'm like, is she wearing commander's pips? Because she didn't have like a single pip the way our lower deckers do. Right. And then like another like she turned a little bit and it looked like more like a bar, almost like the way the Maquis had that sort of like alternate rank insignia on Voyager. So because she's transferring in from Vulcan High Command or wherever, or Expeditionary Force or whatever it was, whether it's like some sort of brevet rank she's wielding, but she's wearing the full uniform. And I love that TD has sort of automatically made her study buddy.
Yeah.
The two least, polar opposite, in temperament. Certainly it is going to be fodder for comedy next season.
I'm sure that's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, and I don't have an answer for Leo's question. As a matter of fact, I'm very impressed.
I only saw it once, and I saw it at 5:30 in the morning when I was packing up my lunch. But
I'm wondering, it could also be if there is a difference there, because I didn't notice it at all. And again, kudos to Leo for even noticing and knowing to pose the question. Maybe it's an O'Brien type designation as far as her rank pip.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe she's just a crewman of some kind or whatever. I haven't seen her previous appearances, but could be something like that.
It was hard because at first it looked like she had commander's pips, like she had 3.
Okay.
And then she turned and it looked more like a bar, but I don't know if that was just like an animation thing or not. It's hard to tell.
Right.
And again, this is the sort of thing that keeps nerds up at night. I don't know if Mike McMahon has commented on it. I'm sure he will at some point, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's picked up on that. I love seeing, and we're jumping a little bit to the end, but there's a big rallying cry of California class ships at the end. Like, as we said, the Texas class ships are bad news. The whole thing was a setup from Buen Amigo.
Right.
And his whole thing is, when you get to an admiral, you hit a wall. There's no way to distinguish yourself. Like, this was like a purely like ambitious, an ambitious move on his part. Right. But she's like, my crew could have been killed. They'd be like, oh, but they weren't. Like he knew about the Breen. He knew about that. He sent them to Deep Space Nine, if you recall, because he was the one who diverted them. And somehow he uses, I thought you would screw that up, because he's trying to get rid of the California class project, or that that whole second contact thing, so he can have his robo ships, which, as it turns out, their code. It also ties into Rutherford's storyline, because Rutherford.
Yeah, we finally get that. We finally get that
Mhm.
answer.
Yeah, like who was the higher officer that Rutherford saw, like vaguely remembered in this, his vision, let's call it that, and it was him. And the idea that he was using Rutherford to build the prototype for the Texas class
Right.
ships, which is similar to the programming that he used to make Badgie, and we all know how badly that turned out. Um, and it is always, with the exception of Data, I would say, there have been no AIs that you were like, well, I'm really glad they made that. Like, they're always bad. M5.
That's the only thing that disappointed me a tiny bit, was that they didn't reference M5.
Yeah, because the consoles had that M5, all those lines,
Yeah.
Right.
the light lines. Although I
Right.
think just having them there was a reference rather than like beating a dead horse. I think it was a little nod to the older school fans. There you go. There's
Oh,
See,
I
it looks
see
like
Lieutenant
food.
Phipps
It's a
there.
bar.
Is it a bar?
It's a bar.
I don't
Definitely a
know.
bar.
So I don't know whether she's some, Mike McMahon. If you're watching our this show, and I suspect you are,
Of course.
why wouldn't you? Listen to three Alta Cockers talk about your very popular TV show. Yeah, I am curious as to what her rank is, and that's a thing that it's not. It doesn't take me out. I'm just curious, like and
Well, I mean,
Now, Keith, hang on, guys. I just wanted to get to this because I was messing
Sure, of
around
course.
trying to find that for you. Keith says he will admit being a little underwhelmed that it was the Admiral, dumbass, and not the Romulans. He says, but just a little.
well, it's funny because also you are not alone, because both you and Mariner were looking for conspiracies that did not exist,
Right.
okay? Because she is now working with Petra Aberdeen, the archaeological guild, and having a Indiana Jones good time, literally like stealing a golden idol, swimming across a chasm or chasm. Now
Yeah.
now I sound like an idiot because I can't remember which one it is.
Chasm,
Chasm.
I think. That's
that is my understanding of the pronunciation, sirs.
Chasm. Okay. Thank you.
Listen
Thank
to
you,
listen to the published author. Yeah.
public author Joe Townsend. And she's having a grand old time, and but the whole thing is she's questioning, like, well, who is bankrolling this whole thing? She's talking to Petra.
Thanks, Heath, for the confirmation.
Yes. So they and she said, "Oh, never mind, you just don't worry about it." And then, of course, she, Mariner, who is not one to take anything at face value, starts like plotting away. She's like, "What do you?" And then she gets caught. She's like, "What are you doing? You're like, you bringing my personal records to find out who's bankroll?" She says, "Well, yes." She says, "Well, go ahead." And she does. And she finds out it's Admiral Jean-Luc Picard. She's like, "He likes mummies even more than you do."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, that was a nice little reference. I thought that was kind of cute.
Yeah.
Just enough.
And it was also, I love the fact that she was like, were you disappointed that it wasn't something more sinister? She's like, I was kind of hoping, always believe, not Joe Townsend. Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate your faith in me, Keith.
Is that she's like, I was hoping it was like a Romulans or maybe even like a Zindi plot. Zindi, that's a nice, like Zindi, who get very little love in Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a nice little drop of the hat for the Zindi, for the Enterprise fans. And
but I do wonder, and I may be being spacey now.
Yeah.
It's going to sound like I'm not paying attention, and it's not true. My brain is going everywhere. But why do you think they didn't make a Daystrom M5 reference because it seems like a natural to do that with.
I guess, but it's like it's an extra beat, and then you have to explain. Might have to explain it.
Yes, I guess.
Whereas it's like if it's a visual clue. Like there is a Zinti who appeared in the animated series, who are like these cat people. They're not exactly like the Caitians.
Right.
They have these weird bat ears and naked tail, and they're recruited by Larry Niven. And they appeared in the episode "The Slaver Weapon," which was basically taking, like Larry Niven wrote the script, and it was basically taken from his stories and inserted.
Well, I'm sorry, Leo. I have a slightly different way to answer that question, Chris. You know, I kind of put it in the realm of like in the Naked Now, way back then, that they found the the original Enterprise's encounter with this particular disease.
Yeah.
And okay. Yeah, okay. James T. Kirk commanding. Okay. Minor footnote in history. Same thing with the M5. For us as viewers, it's a natural connection. And I think in true Lower Deck style, we got the connection just through the visual of the similar computer.
Well, and the funny thing is, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but it is true that the Ultimate Computer episode with the M5, you really think, okay, Daystrom is going to spend the rest of his life on a funny farm.
Yeah.
And by the time we're done with that, because he's just over the top. But subsequent series have the Daystrom Institute, and they have this and that. And that. It seems like everybody's forgotten that he went off his rocker. And they maybe the franchise lived on beyond him. I don't know, but
I think this is my impression of sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah,
and then just recognizing his achievements to that point, and possibly subsequently. Yeah, so he can be remembered finally and have the institute named after him.
Right,
Leo. I had a thought on your point earlier. If you don't mind me backpedaling a bit or backtracking, but as far as the Vulcan Girls rank insignia,
yes,
it does seem like what they had on Voyager, but in my recollection, that was never identified as a quote unquote Maquis rank insignia. It was just something alternative. So maybe it has a bigger meaning in the Star Trek universe that they would use for her as well.
I guess, but they did it for the Maquis because we have to fold them into our crew because otherwise we don't have enough people to get home. And we can't just like lock them up for, years.
I'm just wondering if it has a bigger meaning than just, they would have used on Voyager for that purpose, but maybe it has a bigger purpose in Starfleet. Yeah.
If any Star Trek scholars watching have an answer for that, please let us know.
Yeah.
It's a valid point, Joe Townsend.
Thank you, sir.
So the real Joe Townsend.
For better or worse.
And the whole thing is, so they have they have a race, like Freeman is like, let's have a race to see who can do it better, like his robot ships or us. And she's telling her command crew about it. They were like, what the hell is this? She's like, I don't know, I just made it up at the spot. Basically they have to go to 3 different planets, do 3 different missions, and whoever does it finishes first wins. And the first one is sort of they get a little head, they get ahead, although apparently the Texas, I keep calling the California, the Texas class can beam down already assembled like power plants. Like people don't have to go down and put stuff together, and then they go to another planet and they're trying to set up a colony, an outpost. And while they're doing it, Tendi says, well, there's some particles here that might be pre-sentient. So they had to stop everything. And the doctor checks to make sure. He's like, something about there's thermographic radiation in the background. I always plays Merry Hell with a tricorder, so don't worry about it. And the last planet is, as described, one of those Brigadoon planets that shows up every once a year. And we get to see them, and they had these fairly shittily built sort of like Irish stone hovels in the background, and there's a woman and a man, and they're aliens, and they have like sort of yellowish skin and horns, but they're like, and he's like, I want to see the ship. She's like, you'll never see it. It's a dot in the sky. They're just gonna bring stuff, and then and he keeps like waving to them, and she's like exasperating him. But the Texas ship does get there. The Alito gets there ahead, and they lose. But then they, everybody's kind of bummed, and then, Tendy's like, I feel bad that if I hadn't stopped to check on this stuff, because, that was the thing that let it get ahead of me. And the captain's like, oh, that's perfect. So she's going and she's calling the admiral out. It's like, hey, your guy didn't even check to see if this was. He's like, but it was fine. He was like, that doesn't matter. Like, just because something is a pain in the ass doesn't mean you don't have to do it.
And Chris, there's your other M5 reference, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disregarding the potential for sentient life there.
Yeah. Or regard for any life, as it turns out. Self-preservation was the M5's greatest. The word I'm grasping for.
Priority.
Priority. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's it. So that's when Amigo reveals his evil plan, and Captain is disappointed that you're not another one of these bad actor admirals, and it turns out, well, so I expected more. He says, well, maybe you shouldn't, and he basically activates all the ships and tells them, or one of his ships, the Alito, to destroy the Cerritos, but he gives it autonomy, and it's like, yeah, I'm not going to, no, Father, I'm not going to take your orders, and it destroys him. And they just start attacking this space station,
right?
Which is very much like the one we've seen in the movies, and one of those mushroom style, orbital stations, and they are just like murdering civilians left and right, and they're trying to fight them, and then like a Sovereign class ship cruises in, and it is getting its ass handed to him by these three robot ships who have no compulsion about like the safety of its own crew, because there is no crew. It's just about getting the mission done. So they tease them. There's like, they point at, they do a little on the screen, and they point at Rutherford and says, here's a man who created your code. He says, he's got an off button that's going to, can shut you all off. So, if you want to live, you better catch them. And then they take off and they draw them away from the station. And it was fun, and they're getting their asses handed to them by these ships, because they are not equipped, and they can only go so fast. And they're like, what are we going to do? And everybody's got all sorts of things, including Shax, who says, like, eject the warp core, which he said many times over the course of the last 3 seasons. Also, when they find out that they're all going to go, may get reassigned, Boimler does his impressions of like the senior bridge crew. I believe it was Jack doing all those voices, and not the actual.
I believe so, yeah.
And he does
one of my favorite lines in the whole episode is when he's doing Shax, and then he talks about prophets more than a Ferengi. The prophets. Yeah. I just thought that was so freaking funny. I don't know why. It was like, oh my God, I never sort of put those two things together, and that's really funny.
It's a great joke.
Yeah.
But it breaks Shax's heart.
Yeah.
Because I was going to help me with my phaser, but no, I'm just going to. He throws his phaser out, and he's like weeping. And like the rest of the episode, like, Boimler keeps trying to like make up with him, and the guy just does not want to have anything to do with him.
Right.
And at the end, when they're being chased, finally Boimler gets up. He says, "Everybody, shut up!" And the captain's like, "What are you saying, Mr. Boimler?" It's like, "Everybody, listen to Shax." He says, "Well, he said, but he always would, to drop the warp core." And then they was like, "Oh, that's brilliant!" That they could finally, and he gets this redemptive moment. He's going through the ship, and everybody's applauding, and he finally goes down to the engineering, and him and why can't I remember the chief engineer's name all of a sudden?
Billups.
Billups, yes. And they both drew with the keys. I loved it when Boimler told the bridge crew to shut up and listen to Shax. First season, Boimler would have never done that. That's when I was able to articulate why I like this show so much. Yes, this was a bold Boimler moment, but not in a sort of like dashing hero way, in a way that's like, hey, everybody, shut the f up and
Right.
listen to the good idea.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Because the captain was so used to saying, no, we're not going to drop out we're not going to eject the warp core. That's your answer for everything. But it was the answer this time, and they go down there and they turn the keys, and it goes out there, and it blows up two of the ships, but one of them survives, and it's a whole, sort of going back where we said, it's like, and then Mariner shows up, you know, and the other ship doesn't recognize it as a threat, but she's called all these the rest of the California class ships in.
Right.
And it's kind of it kind of got me right in the feels.
I was going to say, okay, so I wasn't sure whether it was just me being sick or not, and I did watch this at 5:30 in the morning. But
yes.
But yeah, I got choked up when all those ships show up like that.
Oh,
I thought it was a great moment.
Oh, sure.
And we
Yeah,
got to see a lot of these ships who we've seen before, like
Right.
and we got the all Bolian bridge crew. We got to see them.
Mhm.
We got to see the weird mirror version of the Cerritos with the bug Boimler and the male Mariner. I'm not crying, you're crying, says Pete Dickinson. But it was a wonderful moment because it felt like, I mean, the idea of Starfleet is not one of the inherent ideas of Starfleet is stronger together. The idea that we can accomplish more if we work together,
Right.
despite any differences, to make the universe or our part of it a better place.
Right.
And it was terrific. I loved that. Then they do wrap everything up. They we go back to the space station. All the California classes are sort of like in orbit around it. There's a big party in that bar on the Cerritos.
Right.
And Mariner comes back, and she's clearly she's coming back. Her mom wants to say, I'll reinstate you. And there's a lot of wonderful moments, like even because all Mariner's friends feel like, well, we should have backed her up stronger while she was when she was leaving.
Well, although did you notice that they didn't have a reconciliation with Jen? They just had Jen, sort of looking at her like feeling really terrible.
Yeah,
and Mariner just buzzes right by her. So
that's realistic. I mean,
it is. It's very realistic.
Yeah,
they could be pissy with each other for a little while longer till hopefully they get back together.
And there is one little bit as they're panning that everybody at the bar. You see Tendi and the new Vulcan character, and the new Vulcan character, Tendi's looking all happy, and the new Vulcan character is looking at her like. So yeah, I think there's gonna be lots of humor between
there were a lot of like, we got to see all these like bridge officers from other California class ships that we've met over the seasons, and which was a great. I mean, for me, I love that. I love like they don't even have to say anything. It just could be like people walking by. Jennifer's dead to me, says Keith.
Come on, Keith.
Well,
but
we'll see what happens with Mariner and Jennifer, whether they reconcile or whether they just be like, sometimes things just don't work out.
Right.
But I also they were all like, Boimler just felt really bad about it. She's like, listen, he says, she also admits to herself, like even to her mom, she's like, the mom's like, I don't know why I didn't trust you. She's like, well, basically because everything I've done up till then, like my whole life.
Was basically designed to make you not trust me. Yeah.
So I like the fact that she sort of owned up to her behavior, and it wasn't just like, well, I've changed a little bit at this last bit. How come people, all the people who I, annoyed for many years suddenly don't trust me implicitly. There were a lot of wonderful moments. I loved it, and everything is sort of resetting. We'll see more adventures next year with the crew of the Cerritos, and people moving forward, which I'm enjoying, like emotionally, and Tendi is more character growth. Yeah, I think I think we've gotten some good character growth this season, and I think we'll continue to get some.
I agree.
Uh,
So
Roy, because even in a sitcom format, I mean, if your protagonists don't have at least some character growth gradually over the course of time, it's going to get boring real quick, no matter how funny it is.
right.
You know, and I think a lot of that too is even in animated form. I mean, you know, the actors are going to bring growth to their characters as they grow into their own characters and learn more about them themselves. You'll see those changes.
Yeah. I mean, one of what I still think of as one of the best written sitcoms of I guess it was the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s maybe, but was Frasier. And that show totally had character development.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that it was wonderful that way. So I think that even in a sitcom format, you know, you like to see the characters grow a little bit.
Yeah.
You know,
well, as Leo pointed out, I mean, even
Ralph
in the
Cramden,
Simpsons, you know, you see it.
Yeah,
you know.
when Ralph Cramden finds a big suitcase of money on the bus, and it turns out that it's all counterfeit at the end, and he goes right back to being, you know, a poor schlub. It's a little disappointing because you know, you feel bad for him because he was giving money away to everybody. But you know, so yeah, I think that reset that would happen when we were kids in sitcoms. It's nice to see that this show is not doing that, which is good.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a reset in that it brings everybody back to the Cerritos.
Yeah. But I mean, where it's just like
emotionally,
this week that doesn't matter, you know. Yeah.
I liked Boimler's, you know, bold move on the bridge. I thought that was like that took a lot of courage to, like, you know, call out the captain who was, you know, missing a very vital piece of information out of just, you know, like, oh, God, this guy again.
So when did Boimler become a helmsman?
I think he always was. Like, I mean, we get to see them do like a lot of lower deck stuff, but he, you know, he's on command track,
right?
And we've seen him on the bridge occasionally before, although, you know, it's not a bridge focused show.
No, it just felt like this season I've seen him at that post more than I remember from
maybe
seasons. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's maybe because he's, you know, he's getting a little more senior, like he's got a little experience.
Well, I mean, it's not like we haven't seen on TNG and everything else an ensign on the bridge, you know. I mean,
well, I was going to say, it feels to me like a acting ensign Crusher type of vibe, where when they first put him up there, he was there periodically as a learning and experience derived function. Then later on, just became, hey, this is a good guy to have there more often. You know, so
yeah.
I have to give a shout out, by the way, to the USS San Diego and the USS Fresno, because those are my, you know, stomping grounds in California. So.
Yeah, there's a huge list of ships.
It is funny how many of them there are all of a sudden.
There was the San Diego, San Clemente, Sherman Oaks, Vacaville, Burbank, Fresno, Santa Monica, San Jose, Culver City, Anaheim, Riverside, Vallejo, West Covina, Pacific Palisades, Redding, Eureka, Mount Shasta, and the Bakersfield and the Ventura. So there's, you know, they're all like medium to small cities in California.
My favorite gag, well, one of my favorite gags anyway in the episode was the FN reporter saying, you know, wow, it's so great being on this California class ship, you know, because, you know, I came from Flagstaff.
Yeah. And the guy was like,
it's close.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah, that's funny.
Now let's talk a little bit about that post-credit scene. There is, it was in, and I wrote it down because in the Kala system, which was where at the end of season 1, where they fought the Pakleds, and where Shax first died, quote unquote.
Right.
And somebody is like scooping up debris. It's unclear who, because we don't get to see a ship. But it is Rutherford's old implant which he's since had, presumably replaced parts of. And in the screen, we see Badgie. Which leads me to wonder if next season we are going to have a Badgie, Peanut Hamper, and Atomos team up.
Yeah.
Because that would be an interesting. I don't know what they would do with that. I don't have to write it,
right?
For me to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But
no, I thought the same. Yeah.
Well, and again, I always go back to, I have little gaps in my knowledge of Lower Decks because I haven't seen them all. I've been playing catch up, as you guys know.
Yeah.
But is there anything that I may have missed in terms of who turned on the tractor beam to pull these things on board, or is that actually a new mystery?
It's a new mystery, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
People who were we've seen before. I've forgotten the name of this aliens, but they were on the Bird Planet with Peanut Hamper a few weeks ago.
Right.
And then
my favorite.
Yeah, Joe's favorite episode this season. But they also appeared in an episode. I think it was in the first season where there was a contest, not a contest, but there was a contested bit of salvage. It was an old Federation cargo hauler, the same style that we saw in the animated series, if you recall those.
Right.
I think they would hook up to like these tube-like, sort of cargo pods.
Which was in the
no, was it true? It was like they were like these big. I'm thinking of something from the
Starfleet Tactical Manual.
It was a big square cargo ship,
right,
which had narsals on it, but fairly ugly looking. Not like, it's certainly not sleek like the Enterprise.
Right.
But these aliens whose names who are eluding me at the moment. We're trying to salvage stuff, and the readers were like, "Yeah, no, that's Federation stuff. You can't have it." And they're like, "It's perfectly legitimate salvage," and conflicts ensue. So I don't know if they're the ones who are scooping it up. The light was green. I don't know if that means anything because the other ones didn't really have green light, if I recall.
I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it.
But as we all know, I mean, I don't think there's anything that's accidental or coincidental about this show.
No,
everything serves a purpose.
Yeah.
So my two guesses are Romulans, because Romulan's green, but it could also be the Borg.
Could be. We might finally get a tie into that part of the opening credits.
Yes. There's always, and every season they have like additional ships fighting that Borg cube.
Yeah. Any predictions for next season as to who they're going to add to that?
Yeah, because they had a crystalline entity, they had Pakleds and Romulan ships,
right?
And maybe some Klingons is in there as well.
I'd have to go.
They need to put in the little outer space babies from like Galaxy's Child. I think that would be a good addition for that part of the opening credits.
Yeah, exactly. That's what this show is missing.
Yeah. Borg babies are coming with me.
It does beg questions though, as far as, because I have to keep wrapping my head around the fact that this is a certain place in Federation Starfleet history. So, okay, the possibility of Romulans. Well, I guess, is that too big of an element to introduce in this particular series, because there's kind of a mystery, at least canonically, of where the Romulans are at this point.
Right.
We know where they are in Picard's time. About what, 15?
Well, this
almost
is
20 years later.
This is before the supernova of the star on the Romulan.
Is it? I thought it was a little bit after.
I think it happened after this. I think it's
okay.
I think because Picard, even in those little flashbacks, it was like it's after, right? It is after the current. When I say current, the Lower Decks continuity. So I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, Leo, because I do realize now that we are still haven't seen the destruction of Romulus, so that being the case, I mean, it definitely could be Romulans there. At this point in history, they're just still up to Romulan business as usual, I guess.
Yeah.
You know,
They do tend they're a secretive bunch, as it turns out. So
it's always a chess game with the Romulans, after all.
there you go. I don't know. There's all this speculation.
Anybody else have a last thought on the episode?
Just a couple, maybe just one, but I already told you about one of my favorite gags, and I also very much like the mural. Where, you can see our whole history since Picard, last visited us.
Previous episode.
We're addicted here. We were frenzied here, and over here we're set free. But I have to ask this question. This is maybe a bigger point. Just occurred to me during the show just now, as a matter of fact. Wouldn't it have been nice if they had swing by missions back around the Wrath of Khan time? So maybe things might turn out differently if they ever checked on him on Cygis Alpha 5.
Yeah.
Starfleet is notoriously bad on the follow-up. I mean, even look at TNG. I mean, I have great affection for TNG.
Right.
But there are a lot of episodes where there was the one where there was this woman who said she was like the devil who saved this planet, and now they owed it everything. But the whole thing, it turned out to be like a big scam. Like it was,
Ardra?
Yeah. And,
that was Ardra on Devil's Due.
Yes. And they, they proved that she's just a con artist and not, an infernal figure. And then they just fuck off. They just fly off into space. There's not like, not even a comment like, Federation, social engineers will be, visiting to help them reintegrate into a more normal society.
They actually, I felt like they talked about that a little bit more in TOS. They would reference periodically that somebody was going to stay behind, or somebody was going to, Starfleet was going to send somebody, or engineers were going to show up. Or, then you got into TNG and it all kind of went.
You're like, well, seeing the funny papers. Starfleet is, again, notoriously bad on the follow-up.
In the Doctor Who comic crossover.
They need to figure out. It'd be like, that guy Khan. Remember that guy who nearly ruled like a third of Earth, or 2/3 of Earth. Well, they've left him on this like barren planet. Maybe put like a listening post,
right?
Just somebody to keep an eye on him and just make sure.
Well, the idea that nobody knew that the planet exploded, in that star system is kind of crazy.
You'd think it'd be like, the whole orbit of this system seems kind of messed up, or the fact that they got to that planet and there wouldn't be like a red flag, like, hey, don't fucking come here. It does feel like Chekhov, as first officer, perhaps dropped the ball on his.
Although I thought Chekhov wasn't in the space seed.
He wasn't, but he was.
Which is why it's so odd
that he said
Han remembers him.
Well, you know the old joke, don't you, Chris, about that?
Yeah.
What's that? The old joke is that Chekhov was there all along. He just wasn't on the bridge or whatever. And the rumor goes that at one point, Khan desperately had to go to the bathroom. The only available restroom was occupied by Chekhov. When he came out, Khan was like just miserable. He says, I never forget a face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goes, what was that about?
Yeah. Well, speaking of Khan, gentlemen, I'm beginning to feel fatigued again.
Yes. I was trying to find a subtle way to say, looks like both you guys could probably use a little nappy right about now.
Yeah. I finally had an excuse to use that line.
Yes.
Great. Hey, so before we go, Prodigy did drop today as well, which none of us have seen the episode, but I think if we're going to do a Prodigy show next week, we will probably do another doubleheader and cover the first 2 episodes of that. And I'm not sure, Joe, if you want to join us in that or not, but we can talk about that off air. I do think we are going to go ahead and look at what looks like a very interesting season from the Comic-Con trailer that was put out there for it. So we'll give it a shot and see what's going on. Hopefully next week I'll be feeling better. I should be. Yeah, you're a trooper. They offered me that drug that supposedly like makes your COVID experience like half shorter, but I would have had to stop taking every other medication that I take for 5 days. And I'm like, I don't think that's a very good idea.
No, I wouldn't think so. If you would, depending on what you're taking, but I know I wouldn't want to go off mine for suddenly.
Right. Yeah. So, because some of them were blood sugar medications. So it's like, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah, that's probably a good call.
Yeah. I'll just be sick another week longer. So. Any rate, guys, this was a lot of fun. I thought it was a great episode. I am going to rewatch it. I will probably wake up in the middle of the night not feeling well, and I'll go back and rewatch it. But it was really good. I'm sorry I didn't have more notes on it, but such is life. And
that's why you have your friends here and your friends in
that's exactly right.
board and everything else. So
and so at any rate, the show must go on, right?
Yes.
All right, gents. Hey, listen, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who's watching. We love you guys, and hope you all have a great week. And we will see you back here with a new series to watch. So yep. All right.
Sounds great.
Live long and prosper, and let me crank out the end. Still here.